Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Security and Networking EcoCast event brought to you by Actual Tech Media. On today's event, you'll hear from KnowBe4, Gigamon, Phoenix Snap, and SaltStack. Thank you to our sponsors and expert presenters, and of course, thank you to our audience for joining us on the event today. If this is your first time on an EcoCast event, you should know that we at Actual Tech Media created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest enterprise technology solutions, to help you learn as much as possible, to help you learn it all from the comfort of your home or office. You don't have to go downtown to the convention center or halfway across the country. You can get all your questions answered from experts in the industry and have a chance to win some very valuable prizes as well. Before we jump into it, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we first need to cover. First off, we have a number of prizes. We'll talk about those in just a minute, as well as the eligibility requirements for those. Questions. Like I said, we want this to be an educational event, so we want you to ask as many questions as you have during the presentation. Use that questions and answers box. It looks like most everyone out there is familiar with it already. I can tell that from the great comments that are coming in. Hello from St. Louis, Massachusetts, Minneapolis, Wisconsin. Good day, greetings, morning, Chicago, San Diego, New Hampshire, Southern California, Houston, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, West Virginia, just about every state in the United States, and just about every country around the world. So thank you so much for all those great comments and feedback. And I encourage you to use that questions box as you come up with security questions throughout the event. We'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of today's presenters, and I'll be queuing up the best questions for each of those Q&A sessions. So get your questions in early. And then we also have some poll questions for you. We'll be asking you a poll question after each presentation, and I've got a few other poll questions for you along the way. So watch out for the poll questions. We appreciate your participation in those. And then finally, social. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. I'll be tweeting over on Twitter. The hashtag for today is NetSecEcoCast for Networking and Security EcoCast. And I'll be tweeting with that hashtag. You can tweet with that hashtag very easily from your audience console. On the bottom of the console is a Twitter icon. If you click on that and you type in the box right there, it will automatically tweet out to Twitter with the hashtag. The first time you do it, it will authorize your Twitter account. That authorization is kept between you and Twitter. And then from there, you can tweet automatically with the hashtag. So we encourage you to socialize the event that way. And then finally, resources. We have a number of resources on the Handouts tab. If you click on Handouts, you'll find a handout there from each of today's presenters, a PDF, as well as links to the Actual Tech Media Event Center and prize terms and conditions. So make sure you check out the Handouts tab and download those resources. The prizes on today's event, we have our 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. We'll be giving those out after the second, third, and fourth presentation. You can see the agenda for the event today in your audience console as well, with the hamburger or sandwich icon, whatever you want to call it, right there in the middle of your console at the very bottom of the screen. To be eligible for these prize drawings, you must be present on the live event. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Full prize terms and conditions can be found at events.actualtechmedia.com. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. Now, through the MegaCast and EcoCast event series, we've donated thousands of dollars to charity. If you win a gift card and you would like to donate the value of that to a charity, we would love to help you do that. And if so, thank you in advance. Like I said, the hashtag for today is NetSecEcoCast for Networking and Security EcoCast. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter. We are at Actual Tech Media. And feel free to follow me as well, where I am at David M. Davis. Other social media you can subscribe to via Actual Tech Media. We have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, and the 10 on Tech podcast. You can find links to our social media channels in the top of your audience console on the right-hand side there. We've been doing a lot on LinkedIn lately, so also click on the LinkedIn icon, and you can go to LinkedIn and follow our page as well. All right, now, one more poll question before we get into something fun and something new and different we're going to try today. And the poll question on the screen is just, what's your time frame for updating your existing or selecting a new networking and security solution or solutions? All right, I appreciate everyone answering that poll. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. That helps us to know where you are basically in the process of looking for new solutions. So now let's try something different. We've never done this on a MegaCast or EcoCast before. This is totally new. This might totally fail, I should just tell you. We are going to play security trivia. And I can tell you this isn't hard-nosed, really serious trivia. This is supposed to be fun trivia with a little humor mixed in. And so if you don't get the humor, apologize in advance. But this is something different for us to try instead of, kind of the standard hard-nosed, very serious keynote presentation that we've been doing on these events for some time. So cue the music. Actually, we don't have any music, but cue the cool graphic because we are about to start some security trivia. And what we have here are 5 questions. I'm going to read the question, and then we're going to do a poll question and see what you thought, and then I'm going to share the results. And I'm very interested to hear what the results are. Edward already says that the answer is 42. That's a good guess, but not completely accurate. So save those good answers and funny answers for the trivia. All right, so the first trivia question is this. Security gurus say that one of the best ways to secure your network is just to not talk about security at all if you have to, or talk very quietly. And it's called hush-hush security. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this hush-hush security. I tried to say it very quietly, but the idea is if you want to keep things secure, then don't talk about security. And if you have to talk about security, then do it very, very quietly. Okay, so it's called hush-hush security, and I want to know, where do you stand when it comes to adopting hush-hush security? So the answers are that either you're already using hush-hush security, you plan to use hush-hush security in the future, or there's no such thing as hush-hush security, stop wasting our time. All right, some answers are coming in. And don't worry, I won't share these answers with, your friends or colleagues or boss or anything like that. So feel free to just select what you think is the best answer, and I'm going to share the results right now. All right, 7% said that they are already using hush-hush security. John says that this is a preferred technique by major vendors who don't want to deal with their issues. And Sam says talking about security is like Fight Club. The first rule of security is don't talk about security. All right, good feedback. So 13% said they plan to use hush security, and 78% said stop wasting my time. And I apologize for wasting your time. Second trivia question here is microsegmentation. One of the most popular forms of security today is logically slicing the network into segments that are as small as individual applications, and this is called microsegmentation. So the question here is, what's your stance on microsegmentation? Are you using microsegmentation today, or you plan to use microsegmentation, or there's no such thing as microsegmentation? Again, stop wasting my time. So let's see what the results are on this one. All right, some good feedback coming in. Good answers, thank you. Edward says microsegmentation is the way to go. Kieran wants to know what the answer was to question number 1. I'm sorry to say that hush hush security is just nonsense. I just made it up. It was a real distractor. But microsegmentation, on the other hand, let's find out the answers here. Microsegmentation is real, and it is really an innovative, great way to secure your network, slicing the network down into segments that are as small as individual applications. And we do a lot of events here around microsegmentation at Actual Tech Media, and I know a lot of companies have implemented it with great success. So for the 16% who said there's no such thing as microsegmentation, I'm sorry, that was not correct. And for the 32% who are using microsegmentation already, congratulations, kudos to you, very cool. All right, third trivia question. I know we're running out of time here. This is security by obscurity, specifically called the canine method. Now, a long-held security tactic is called security by obscurity, and the best way to go about this is to, for example, rename the root and administrator account to be the same name of your dog. And that way, an attacker is never going to find the root account unless they know your dog, right? So the poll question here is, what's your stance on the canine method of security by obscurity? And I'm curious to find out the answers here. Is this a good practice? Are you implementing this? Is it a good idea and you plan to implement it? Or third answer, this is just plain silly. I got some good feedback here. Edward said, I have seen this a lot. Angela said, I know a lot of surgeons that use this method. Very cool. I didn't know the canine method of security was so widely implemented. Oh, and Todd says his dog's name is Root. I love it. And Ed said, using your dog's name is silly, but renaming the accounts is a good idea. All right. Good feedback. Let me share the results. 62% said this is just plain silly. 16% said they've implemented this with their dog's name. And 20% said, good idea, they're going to implement it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with me through these sometimes little crazy questions. Now, when it comes to phishing, this is the fourth of 5 questions, so we're almost done. 76% of businesses reported they were targeted by phishing in a calendar year. And the poll question here is, do you believe it? Do you believe it that 76% of businesses were targeted by phishing? And if so, you plan to do more about it? Second response is highly unlikely. Phishing isn't that high on our list. You know, we're not that interested. Or third option there's no such thing as phishing. It's called phishing with an F. And I completely misspelled it. All right, let me share the results of this with you because we got one more, and I know our first presenter is ready to go. 96% said they believe it and they intend to do more about phishing, and that is the correct answer because 76% of businesses in a poll or a survey reported that they were targeted by phishing. So there's some just crazy statistics out there. And it is spelled phishing with a PH, by the way, for the one person who replied that I had misspelled it. And then last question here in our security trivia, and that is ransomware attacks occur every 12 seconds. And I kind of found this hard to believe. But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you believe it? And those are the 3 answers there. First, I believe it. We've been targeted by ransomware and plan to do more about it. Second, highly unlikely. It just can't happen that often. And third answer is the real good guys of Star Wars are the Galactic Empire, and they would never initiate a ransomware attack like you saw in the graphic. Angela posted a message that said she loves this trivia. Please do this trivia again. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And I appreciate anyone's feedback out there on what you think about security trivia, if this is fun or if this is just plain silly. Edward said there's a lot of fishing going on up here in Minnesota in our 10,000 lakes, and that's fishing with an F. Renee said that the trivia is silly. I'm sorry to hear that. Ryan said he loves the trivia. Nick said +1 to Angela's comment. Rick said great addition. Edward said it's fun to do in the future. David said please use this again. So great feedback. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for your patience sticking with me through the security trivia. So I'll share the results of this. 11% said the real good guys of Star Wars are the Galactic Empire and would never initiate a ransomware attack. I'm not sure I buy into that. 79% said they believe it because it is true. Ransomware attacks occur every 12 seconds. And I'm sorry for the 8% who said it just can't happen that often, but statistics say that it really does. So it's something to be aware of. And with that, we have reached the end of Security Trivia. Thank you for playing. Thank you for joining us on the Security EcoCast. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter on the Security EcoCast. That is Mr. William Bell, Executive Vice President of Phoenix NAP. William, are you there?
I'm here, David. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the event today, William. Take it away.
All right, guys. Let's move on to the next slide here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of some of the security best practices that we've developed around various architectures, both for our cloud service offerings and also, other types of protection and security against ransomware like backup and disaster recovery solutions. I believe we've got Robert from Veeam with us today. I'm going to let him do a couple slides and talk about their solution there. And hopefully you guys find this super valuable and can take a few things away from what we're doing. So I'm going to start just real quick, high level, who is Phoenix NAP? If you guys have never heard of us, we're a really large infrastructure as a service company with data centers and geo-dispersed locations around the globe. Really focused on security, really focused on customer success. And it's about kind of being that infrastructure as a service company that can deliver solutions to businesses, but also still have a helping hand in the process, right? Not just turn you loose on a platform and say, well, build whatever you can and hope you get it right. So that's kind of what we're here. This is kind of a real quick high-level footprint of our deployments today. So pretty much if you're somewhere, we're there, with some exceptions. And we're working really diligently to make this continue to grow over time and focus on delivering kind of a unified platform around that. And I get into that because I think it's important as you look at different solutions in the market that you understand and you have the same service level delivered to you as a business, kind of anywhere that you're at around the globe. All right. So this is kind of touching on some of the things that David was doing in his fun, super fun trivia. David, please do it again. Really excited about that. When we look at the market, what we've come to understand, both ourselves and through the research partners that we have, IDC and Gartner, that, most organizations out there are just absolutely unprepared to handle a major incident and issue. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that they just don't have the people. They don't have the people or the financial resources to keep up with the bad guys. And it's a really hard problem to solve for. It's not something that you can just make go away, right? And we find a lot of businesses that are not the biggest of the big struggling every single day to protect critical assets that are important to their company, right? And what this results in are outages, whether that's ransomware, DDoS attacks, deletion of business critical data, potential compromise of systems that require you to shut things down. People have their business absolutely interrupted all the time from these types of issues. And David said every 24 minutes or something like that, someone's hit with a ransomware attack, which is just crazy. When we look at what the market's trying to do to solve for this, The only outlet that the government and various other agencies have, right, whether they're the payment card associations or whatnot, is to just fine you, to punish the people that are attacked, which is just nuts, but they don't have a lot of other options, right? They're trying to force the right behavior, and that's an investment in information security. So when we look at all the market and we talk about, what makes the most impact into helping get control of the security challenges, we see kind of three major areas. First off, and this is visibility into infrastructure security, I'll call it visibility into data in general. People just don't know what they have, right? And it's hard to secure what you don't have. They're constantly bombarded with really, crazy compliance standards that have a lot of different controls and make for really difficult, solutions to be implemented inside of these businesses. And they're being pushed. You guys on the call are being pushed to go to the cloud, get out of the hardware business, right? Get out of buying software licensing. Just put all your data in the cloud and everything's going to be great, right? And you end up straddled across both on-prem, in at least one infrastructure as a service cloud, and sometimes multiple, depending on how large your organization is and what you're searching for in a solution. And I find that you get these really, really inconsistent security footprints that make it really challenging for you to say with confidence that you have your data under control and that your business is protected. So when we look at this, from a very high level, we want to make sure that we're putting into practice the things that you would do on-prem and that you should be doing on-prem as you try to improve your security. So you want to make sure that you've got all your platform level infrastructure really locked down, right? And so when I talk about platform level infrastructure, I'm talking about hypervisors, network switches, servers themselves, and access to things like IPMI, that you're focused heavily on making sure that those hard bits are as protected as possible. And that once you get into the data layers and kind of hypervisor plus, that you're focused on taking those workloads and you're protecting them as diligently as you can, right? And I mentioned a couple of areas here. David, thanks for the microseg shout out, right? We're really big believers in microsegmentation. It's a daunting task to implement, and there's been a lot of work, and we help customers all the time. We're trying to deliver on best practices to get these right. But it's hard to transition towards a microsegmented environment, but the payoff is huge. We've done other talks about massive increases in east to west traffic, east to west compromises, right? Where someone compromises one system, ransomware, something like that, and they just blow through your entire environment once they get through your perimeter. And just making sure that you're taking the very, very basic steps to try to get that right? And when we look at one of the places we think that's really important, I'm going to talk a little bit about backup because, I think that to some extent it's the last line of defense. It's truly the one thing that can protect you from everything else failing, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. So what are we doing, right? We said about 2 years ago, the market is missing a cloud service, a community cloud service specifically built for small, medium businesses to bring their data, their 20, their 100 virtual machines, right, to take them and bring them to a cloud service that is specifically designed with security and compliance in mind. That's going and taking the steps of bringing security, and potentially I'll stop short of saying forcing it upon you, but we try really hard to force security upon your architecture, right? we try really hard to make sure you're doing the very, very basics to make sure that your data is protected and secured, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. So when we look at our data security cloud offering, and we start with what are we doing to make this a secure cloud service, right? It starts with that base layer of infrastructure protection. It's building redundancy and availability into the system. It's delivering the latest and greatest network security and perimeter security software and techniques. It's making sure that we have people, eyeballs, looking at the environment 24/7, 365, protecting it from issues and fighting them when they occur, right? Instantly and working diligently to make sure that things kind of stay in control all the time. And how are we accomplishing some of that, right? So when you look at this secure foundation, we're doing a lot of work with companies like Intel and VMware. I don't know how many Europeans are on the call, but I have a talk at VMworld coming up about kind of infrastructure advancements and technology advancements in infrastructure and infrastructure security. And it's kind of a testament to the commitment that our partners at people like Veeam and VMware and Intel have into making the infrastructure components as absolutely secure as possible. And we don't have a ton of time today to get into all that, but happy to talk through some of that with any of you if you really want to. So, kind of last level, and I'll turn it over to my buddy at Veeam. What are we doing today from a key technology stack perspective, right? We've got all this infrastructure security, we've got 24/7 threat management, and we've got the best technologies from a hypervisor perspective in VMware, both from a cloud management perspective, from a capacity and monitoring perspective, and from a software-defined networking and network security perspective. And that all kind of gets forged together to make for an environment that simplifies cloud adoption, that brings security to businesses that struggle every day to make that a reality. And then we do something kind of I don't think anyone else does. We bundle in backups for all of our customers' data, period. You can't consume the infrastructure platform without a backup powered by Veeam. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert and let him take it away and talk a little bit about kind of what they see, and how we're working with them as a cloud service provider, and we'll wrap it up after that. So, Robert, take it away.
Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate it. Hi, guys. My name is Robert. I'm an inside sales engineer here at Veeam. So when we talk about backup, and specifically from the perspective of security, it's not just as simple as plugging in a USB drive and using Windows backup and calling it a day. We want much more than that, and in a much more secure and manageable way. And Phoenix NAP really kind of takes that to heart. And like you said, you're not going to get any type of infrastructure on their end without having a backup in place, and backup is absolutely critical. So when you talk about, it's not just backup. Veeam is backup and replication. And so, you see the points right here. In just a couple hours, you're not talking about weeks long worth of projects and X amount of configuration and all sorts of moving parts. It can be done in a couple hours. And most importantly, think about it like an extension to your environment. You're not looking at, some set of disparate parts that are, that kind of work together. It's not clunky. And Phoenix NAP is not somebody that is not an organization that takes this type of stuff lightly. And so they really want to make sure that you're set, and most importantly, very quickly. So for those of you that are not familiar with Veeam, Veeam's been around for a little while. So we go back to 2006 when we were founded. Over 300,000 customers worldwide, a 73 Net Promoter Score, which is well above the industry average. And we rely very heavily on our cloud service providers for a lot of our customers. And Phoenix NAP is one of our biggest partners. We love Phoenix NAP, and I'm coming from a former Phoenix NAP customer myself. We had infrastructure in their data center, and it was absolutely amazing. I love it. So, kind of diving in a little bit, I'll touch on this kind of lightly because there's an awful lot going on. But when you talk about like traditional backup, again, I touched on the plug in a USB drive and use Windows backup, or break out the old I don't know, Acronis or whatever. It's things are not the same way they were a decade ago. William touched on, hey, everybody's saying make a push for the cloud. Move out, get out of the infrastructure business. Well, a lot of folks have done that completely. A lot of folks have a hybrid scenario. Some folks are completely on premises, and everything kind of in between. And so you kind of need a software solution that can adapt to every single one of those types of situations. And then Veeam does that very well. We're not interested in providing you protection for just your Windows servers. We're not interested in providing you protection just for what you have in AWS. We're interested in providing you backup and replication services for everything and everywhere. So we support VMware. We can back up things in the public cloud, AWS, Azure, your managed cloud with Phoenix NAP, and all the way down to physical and even Office 365, which is becoming a bigger target these days when it comes to things like ransomware. I mean, we're not interested in giving you baseline, hey, we can back up your stuff and hopefully everything's okay. We want a full, total solution. And with partners like Phoenix NAP, we get that done, and it's something that our customers don't have to concern themselves with. And that's why we have, for those of you that are not familiar with the 3-2-1 rule, 3-2-1 rule is very simple: 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media, and one of which is offsite. And we kind of extended that a little bit to add the 0, so the no errors after backup recoverability verification. And so what I like to call that, my 0 rule is 0 concern. So you'll have your 3 copies of your data. You'll have them on 2 different media, one offsite, and with features like Sure Backup, with features like Sure Replica, and all of it being managed within Phoenix NAP, all of this is going to be completely automated and tested on a schedule that you have defined or that you've worked with Phoenix NAP to define, so that when your backups are being taken and your VMs are being replicated to a managed site or whatever, you're not going to try to do a restore and hope everything works out. Nobody wants to be that 2 a.m. person trying to do a restore and, fingers crossed it all works out. That's terrifying, and I've been in those types of situations. And that's where Veeam comes into play to make sure that you don't have to deal with that any longer. You're going to be able to know, again, automated. You'll get a little report in an email that says, hey, my backups were good. You can do malware scans. You can test these things. You can use our data labs to test updates, to test feature changes, all manner of stuff. And again, with a partnership with Phoenix NAP, you're getting a solid base, a solid background. These people know what they're doing, and to the point where, you can trust them, and you can trust Veeam to be part of that overall solution at the end of the day. And we couldn't be happier to have this partnership in place. And like the last point right there at the top, Phoenix NAP offers turnkey cloud backup, replication, and Office 365 solutions. So if you want to just put backups in the cloud in Phoenix NAP, go right ahead. Do you want to replicate your environment to Phoenix NAP in the event of a DR scenario? You can fail over. You can do that, and most importantly, I've done it before. I've given these types of demos. Failover is a button click away. And truthfully, you may not even have to click the button yourself. Use Phoenix NAP to help kind of get this going for you. It's amazing what we can do, and with just a little bit of setup. And again, you're going to be working with Phoenix NAP to get this accomplished anyway. So last 2 slides for me, I'm going to kind of just give you a broad overview of how this kind of works. So in terms of the 3-2-1 rule, you have your first copy right here. This is your environment. So the first copy is your live data. All right, next, your second copy. That's going to live on a repository. So repositories can be all manner of things, but your first copy, just think about that like your first backup. So this is going to live typically locally. So it works great. Then how do you get that additional copy? And most importantly, how do you get this guy off-site? So there's a product that we call Cloud Connect. So Cloud Connect, again, it's offered through our service providers. Phoenix NAP is a big proponent of this. You can have your data copied off-site. So again, if you're just doing backups locally, that's great. But if you want that off-site to get that extra layer, that air gap solution, that additional layer of protection, kick it out to a third copy off-site to Phoenix NAP. Let them take care of that for you, backed by some of the finest infrastructure that I've ever been privileged to work with. It's absolutely incredible. 2 different repositories, different locations, everything nice and clean for you, ready to go. Let's go ahead and move forward a little bit. So one of the things that I touched on very briefly, is because this is actually quite a large conversation, is disaster recovery as a service. So how does Phoenix Snap or people that use Veeam as a solution to provide DR as a service, how do they actually give that to the customer? Well, that's via something called a hardware plan. So with a conversation with Phoenix Snap, you can say, hey, I need X amount of CPU, I need X amount of RAM, X amount of storage, and most importantly, dedicated networking. So you don't have to be, sharing VLANs with another customer. And this is Phoenix Snap going, hey, we're going to offer you this amount of infrastructure, CPU, RAM, storage. We can have all of this set up and ready for you to go. And again, a very simple plan. You just click go. Your stuff's being replicated there. Disaster strikes, a plane crashes into your building or, catches fire. Who knows? One button click away and all your stuff is failed over live in Phoenix Snap without even a hitch. A few minutes later, your customers are online like nothing even happened. And that's what we offer in a partnership with Phoenix Snap. That's what Veeam can do for you. You are a button click away from having everything kind of taken care of, and that's really what we want to do for you, and that's what a partnership with Phoenix Snap allows.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert, so much for everything. He spent a lot of time talking about us, and it wouldn't be possible without a great partner in Veeam Software. They've been there with us since we entered the backup and DR space almost 6 years ago now. We've been working really hard to make sure that that businesses don't have to overcomplicate the technical components of the offsite backup disaster recovery, and that customers in our cloud services don't exist without data protection. It's absolutely critical. And I'll kind of wrap it up again. Sometimes a backup, a solid copy of your data, is the last line of defense. When everything else goes wrong and all of your security protections have broke down, that backup can be your lifesaver. So it's super important. And I threw this up kind of at the end. We try to make everything real simple. We bring it all together for our customers, make it easy, and hopefully, we can work with some of you guys to see if there's ways that make sense for your business. That's all I have today. Again, I want to thank Robert from Veeam. Thank you very much to the EcoCast team and Actual Tech Media. I hope you guys have a great rest of your EcoCast.
Thank you, William, and thank you, Robert. Yeah, great presentations. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up the poll question here, and we'll leave that up. And the question is, what additional information would you like about the Phoenix Snap and Veeam solution? And this is a multi-select question, so you can select one or multiple. So let's see. First question that came in here, they're asking about Phoenix Snap. How many data centers do you all have?
Yeah, so today we're providing services, like our whole portfolio, out of 9 data centers worldwide. Our flagship facilities and locations are in Phoenix, Arizona, and in Ashburn, Virginia, and a really large presence in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So we're kind of growing all those out, simultaneously. But it's been a roller coaster growth for us.
Very nice, very nice. Next question, when it comes to DR, if they want to use DR as a service through Phoenix Snap, they're asking here essentially about the pricing model. What should they expect
Super
in that
simple,
regard?
right? So we just kind of made some huge sweeping changes. I think they're industry leading in this area. We've boiled it down to how much storage do you need, how many VMs do you have, period. That's all you need. You bring those 2 data points to us, and we can turn you around to price in a matter of minutes. And it is extremely cost effective, right? Probably more so than even what you see from some of the public cloud hyperscalers in terms of actually delivering on the promise of an offsite backup and disaster recovery protection.
Very nice. And so kind of in a similar regards, this question is about whether Phoenix Snap can help them to size their DR environment. Like how big do they know, or should they create in DR? Should it just match their production, or is it smaller? How do they know what to do there?
Yeah. So what we do for the customers that really want to get into this and aren't coming at us with just, here's my number of VMs and here's how much storage I have. we really like to work with businesses to understand exactly what they need to protect. We've got some tool sets that we can leverage against your VMware environment or on-prem environment. We've got some best practices around that. We want to talk you through kind of your applications and some of your utilization, and really make sure that what we're providing meets your needs, because you can always grow it. If you decide later you want to add more, it's simple and easy. And that's the way we've tried to make everything that we do.
Okay, nice. I like that. What about automated testing? There's a question about that here.
Yeah, so all of our products and services are self-service. So the customer can work with us, can leverage the portal, they can point and click and fail over or test their failover. Veeam offers a really great option to do a test failover, and that can kind of simulate the failover stuff. We also are allowing customers once a year to do 7 days of DR testing for free. So you can actually do a full failover and not incur any new charges while you're testing out all your data protection, your disaster recovery plan, spin it back down, and keep the replication in place. And I think that's it's something we also offer when a customer has an actual incident, right? We don't nickel and dime you. We give you 7 days to get your life together and either decide you want to stay, and we have a lot of customers that ultimately decide they want to stay in the cloud service because everything is running just as well as it was on-prem, or to replicate back and fail back.
Nice. Another question here. I know you or Robert mentioned Cloud Connect. Is that a separate product from Veeam Backup and Replication, or is that included? How does that work?
The best thing that Veeam ever did in the whole world is build that into their product line. So, Robert, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as long as you have a licensed version, right, you can use Cloud Connect, any license.
That is correct, and you can send all your stuff right to Phoenix Snap, no problem.
Yeah,
nice.
So pretty simple, easy.
I like that. Another question here, does Veeam offer a way to back up clients or endpoints?
Yes,
yeah,
they do.
absolutely.
So,
go ahead, Robert.
Tell
them about the agent.
My apologies. Yes, so absolutely we do. We can. It's not even. We have agents. So we have a Veeam agent for Windows and a Veeam agent for Linux. Can be used to back up any physical servers, endpoints, workstations, you name it. We can back it up with an agent. No problem.
Okay.
And the best part about that is it's an operating system level backup, right? So as long as you create something similar architecture in a cloud service, we can actually bring that back to life either on a physical server or inside of VM.
Absolutely, you can.
Cool. Well, I think you guys answered all the questions here, and that's all the time we have for our Q&A session. But it's been great having you on the event. Thank you, William, and thank you, Robert.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
Take care.
For more information on Phoenix Snap and the Veeam solution, check out the handout that's available right there in your audience console. And, of course, also visit the Phoenix Snap website and veeam.com. And with that, it's time to move on to our next presentation on today's Security EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Sam Kumarsamy, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Gigamon. Sam, are you there?
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Sam. I'm great. Thanks for being on the event today. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Dave. Really excited to be presenting on behalf of Gigamon today. And today's topic is, got encrypted traffic on your network? How do you handle it? And Gigamon has a solution that I think all of you are going to be excited about, really. It's centralized traffic decryption with our visibility fabric, and it's going to be scalable as well so that you can really decrypt SSL as well as TLS traffic. And really excited to be presenting today. And let's get started without any further ado. Why is there a need for visibility into SSL or TLS encrypted traffic? Well, for several reasons. First one is 89 out of the 100 of the top websites on the internet now default to HTTP ENCRPS, which means encrypted traffic. So there's a need. Encrypted traffic is really, really important because it helps to encrypt the traffic and keep it safe from hackers. At least that's the thinking when you do that. But there's also very limited visibility into SSL/TLS traffic. And in recent surveys, 48% of SecOps teams do not have information on what is being encrypted. Now, that is really, really not good. And 80% of enterprise traffic is encrypted, by the way, as of this year. And 33% of malware uses encryption. We all know that. So that is a need. And then there is another survey that actually says 60% of malware uses encrypted traffic. So with that in mind, there are a few other things as well. 67% of blind spots are because of SSL traffic, and that's a major obstacle. And as I mentioned, not only is hidden malware not good, there's a need to expose this hidden malware. If you don't expose it, it leads to phishing attacks as well. So all the more reason why you need to decrypt traffic. Now, decryption can be done in several ways. One way that many companies use is to decrypt at each individual security tool that you have, which means you have to decrypt it when it goes through a web application firewall. Let's start with perhaps with next generation firewall. You decrypt it, you inspect it, then you forward it to the next tool, which has to decrypt it again. Now, that is a very processor intensive. It can be very expensive because what you do is that each tool you have to buy a processor specifically for decryption because it is pretty expensive and it impacts the overall network performance as well. Because as you keep decrypting the traffic, you have to re-encrypt it back, send it to the next tool, and so on. So imagine if you have hundreds of tools, you'll have to keep doing that. And that can be pretty expensive, not scalable as well, because if you have 100 gig traffic, trying to do that in real time is very, very difficult. And there are compliance challenges as well. So imagine if you have to be HIPAA compliant, where you have to protect certain personal identification information, social security numbers, personal names, patient information, financial information. You have a $10 million client, you can't expose his name, his personal address, and so on. So you have to have the ability to selectively decrypt the traffic. You cannot just decrypt all traffic and inspect it. So if that is a constraint, then you're challenged with the tool has to be able to identify the traffic as coming from certain sensitive sites such as healthcare and so on. And that requires additional work and processing as well. Plus, you have to have policies in place to specifically identify those traffic and make sure you don't decrypt them and expose yourself to all sorts of fines, be it in the education field, in healthcare, or in the financial environment too. So at Gigamon, what we do is we decrypt once and have it inspected by multiple tools. As you can see from the architecture here, we have a next generation network packet broker solution, which we call as Gigamon Visibility Fabric, which sits in line, as you can see here, between the firewall, after the firewall actually. So once the firewall lets in the traffic, you put our Gigamon Visibility Fabric inline and then hang all the inline and out-of-band tools off of our appliance, or what we call, as I mentioned, the Gigamon Visibility Fabric or the next generation packet broker. So this way, our network packet broker has interfaces for different speeds of your network, be it 10 gig, 25 gig, 40 gig, or 100 gig. So it allows you to scale based on your particular traffic needs. So you don't have to be worried from a tools perspective whether it scales or not. Obviously, you have to have certain capacity within the tools, but just because you have 100 gig traffic flowing through your network doesn't mean all your tools have to see all that traffic. So we have a couple of benefits in this method. One is we decrypt it once, all the traffic using the Gigamon visibility fabric, and then pass on the traffic to the individual tools like your intrusion prevention system, web application firewall, and so on. So the double benefit is, one is the decrypt once and supply it to multiple tools. The other thing is we are able to filter the traffic and only send the right traffic to the right tools. So it's two benefits you get from a single solution, unlike the other decryption solutions. Because we can filter specifically only web application traffic and send it to the web application firewall for inspection. You don't have to send email traffic, for example. I'm just giving an example. And in this sense, you can also have failover of the tools, or what I call as distributed load balancing, or distributed load between the different tools, because if you have more than one intrusion prevention system, one fails, you can pass on the load to the other live boxes while you take it down for maintenance purposes and so on. The decrypt ones also has other advantages because you're taking the load off your existing tools. Your tools, you don't have to spend that extra processors that you need for decryption. So imagine if you have hundreds of tools in a large enterprise, that leads to substantial savings. We also have simple policies you can set where you can inspect traffic, whether it's coming based on URLs from the different sites. So if it's a healthcare site, using our domain name and URL, we have a certain OEM with a company that will identify the site the traffic is coming from, and then if it is coming from a healthcare or a financial site, we can say don't decrypt that traffic, just forward it, because to be compliant with the different regulatory requirements such as HIPAA, PCI, and so on, or GDPR for our EMEA customers. So you can really pass on only the information that you need to, and we scale as well, as I mentioned previously, for 10 gig, 40 gig, and 100 gig traffic. So several advantages while doing it overdoing it at the individual tool level. So some of the other advantages, as I mentioned, is we can also decrypt traffic at all TCP ports as well as applications. So we go from layer 1 through layer 7. We can also look at custom applications if needed, decrypt it, and look at the traffic there as well before forwarding it to the right tools. Now, when I say tools, they can be both inline and out of band. So it can be out of band like DLP or SIM, as you all know, like Splunk and QRadar and all that as well. The other advantage is, as I mentioned, you decrypt once and share with all tools. Substantial advantage over some of the next generation firewall vendors out there who will claim they can do it. Nothing wrong with that, to have decryption there, but lateral movement of traffic, because we sit inside the firewall, you can actually even look at lateral movement of traffic, which next generation firewalls really cannot detect. And we maintain compliance, as I mentioned previously, by selectively decrypting traffic. We look at both inbound and outbound SSL traffic as well. And last but not the least, we provide strong crypto support. So Diffie-Hellman, the latest and greatest cryptography, perfect forward secrecy, elliptic curve cryptography. We support all of those types of different keys, and that is something we have a substantial advantage over other products that do it at the tool level. In addition to that, like I mentioned, we also have the capability of doing it inline and bypassing us in case, if you're wondering, hey, what happens if the Gigamon Visibility Fabric fails? two things we can do. We can provide high availability by having a parallel Gigamon visibility fabric in place, but also we can do a switch where should the Gigamon box fail for whatever reason, which is very rare, by the way, we can actually allow the traffic to pass through. From a security perspective, we don't recommend it, but I'm saying the worst scenario, if the network folks want high availability and performance is their top priority, we can do that. But again, not recommended from a security perspective. But these are some of the advantages of using the Gigamon visibility fabric as your decryption mechanism, if you will. With that, let me open it up for any Q&A that you might have. Are there any questions? Dave?
There are, yes, sir. Let's see. We've got some questions coming in, Sam. First question, Kieran is asking, can this integrate with a Palo Alto next-gen firewall?
It's not a integration like I showed you in the diagram, and let me refer back to the diagram. I think it's important to see where we sit within the. So we sit typically after the firewall. So it's not so much an integration, but like I mentioned, it's important. Next generation firewall, Palo Alto does do decryption at the firewall level, but what we can do is should things pass through the firewall, for the lateral movement of traffic, that's where we are a substantial advantage over the next generation firewall products, because they just do it at the front end. What we can do is all the way from layer 1 through layer 7, look at all the inspection and any lateral movement of traffic, encrypted traffic, we can take a look at that as well. So for all the reasons that I indicated, the advantage over doing it at the individual tool level applies here as well. So not so much integration, but we can work. Should they have a next generation firewall in place, we're not trying to replace the next generation firewall, but as a best practice recommendation, we say do it at the network packet broker level, the decryption. It's substantially more advantageous than doing it at the firewall level. Hope I answered that, Dave. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me bring up this poll question while we do some other questions or answer some other questions here from the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? We'll just leave that up. Next question that came in, can the Gigamon visibility fabric traffic be analyzed?
Absolutely. That's something we are working on as well. That's one of in our future roadmap, which I can't go into too much detail. But that traffic we can actually, so we don't capture the traffic or store it anywhere. We inspect the real packets as they come through, the network packets. In the roadmap, however, our goal is in the near future, we have had requests from customers to be able to analyze that traffic as well. So analytics is something we are certainly targeting for the near future. But right now, all we do is we inspect the traffic live. We don't hold it or store it and then pass it on. Like I said, we filter, apply the different traffic intelligence, and allow it to flow through. Right now, we just decrypt the traffic, look at it. We can filter it as well. So those are additional functions besides SSL decryption. SSL decryption happens to be one of our smart options, if you will, software options. We, of course, have dedupe, net flow generation, metadata generation, application filtering, application metadata, and so on. But want to get back to the topic, yes, we do not store any network packets. We inspect, we filter, we apply some traffic intelligence, and then forward it to the right tools.
Got it. Okay. Another question here, they're asking, how would this be different from the typical packet capture and analyzer tool that someone is used to using to analyze network traffic. Can you explain how this kind of takes it to a whole different level?
Yeah, for all the reasons I said. So typical packet inspection, we inspect from layer 1 through layer 7, and we have 14 different what I call as GigaSmart applications, like application intelligence, traffic intelligence. We also offer for service providers specifically, like GTP correlation, SIP, and so on, so that the traffic, it's not just about collection, tapping the traffic, analyzing the traffic, and just forwarding it. We apply, as I mentioned, traffic intelligence. So we look at packet duplication. We can deduplicate the packets so that your tools are not overloaded and they're providing the right information from a storage perspective. Again, we forward it to the tools for forensic purposes. We do not store it. It's only the tools that are attached to our Gigamon Visibility Fabric, whether it be IPS, DLP, SIM, that do the analysis. We also do application intelligence. As I mentioned, we visualize the different types of applications that flow through, and we can inspect more than 3,200 different out-of-the-shelf applications, including custom apps. We can visualize them, filter and send only the right traffic to the right tools. We can also look at the attributes of the applications. We look at over 5,000 different attributes from a user experience perspective, from a security perspective, from a network performance perspective. We look at protocols and so on. So these are some of the traffic intelligence that I'm talking about. NetFlow, we can look at NetFlow and then look at a subset of the data and forward it from a SIM perspective so that they have contextual information, so that they can immediately prioritize from the thousands and thousands of events. For example, a Splunk sees, we send contextual information that they can filter and take action on immediately from a SecOps perspective. So that ability to look at very specific contextual information is something we provide. So we are more than your regular network packet broker analysis. We call it the next generation network packet broker. And it helps both SecOps and NetOps as well from a collaboration perspective, because what we help is we simplify the overall architecture. We have all the packets flowing through our network packet broker, so we can offload net flow generation from, for example, the routers and switches. We don't have to overburden them. And then we take up all the load, just like the SSL decryption. We offload it from the different tools, and we make it more efficient because we decrypt once and have it inspected by multiple tools. We are vendor agnostic. We are not tied to a specific vendor. So all these are some of the best practices that we recommend for our customers. We're not saying we are the only solution out there, but we work with all the tool vendors. So we are not trying to displace the other tool vendors. We are trying to make them, we believe in making them more efficient. Therefore, from a customer perspective, we save costs and we make their life easier, if that's a better way of putting it, Dave.
No? Okay, I like that. Another question here, Sammy is asking, what's the maximum throughput capacity of the Gigamon Visibility Fabric?
Great question. Now, it depends. We have 3 flavors, so it can go up to 6.4 terabits per. Our highest level visibility fabric is called, we make it available as physical, virtual, and in the cloud as well. We do support it on AWS, Azure, for the folks out there who are cloud specific. So it's not just a physical box, but we also have virtual as well as in the cloud. So we, like I mentioned, we support AWS, Azure, OpenStack, Nutanix, as well as VMware. Capacity per the highest throughput, so we have HC1, HC2, and HC3. HC1 is about 360 gigabit. Then we have almost a terabit support on HC2, and the HC3 is 6.4 terabit. and it supports up to 32 clusters, the HC3. So 32 times 6.4 gives you 205, I believe, around 205 terabits. So in terms of scale, it's amazing. So we have solutions for different customers. So take your pick, be it remote site, service providers, enterprises. Pick your vertical, financial, healthcare. We have the support for you. So please feel free to call us and talk to us.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, I think we've answered all the questions that are in the queue right now, but a really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Sam.
Thank you so much, Dave. My pleasure.
For more information on Gigamon, check out the handout that's available right there in your audience console. That will give you all the info you need on the Gigamon Visibility Suite. Also visit gigamon.com for more information. All right. It's now time for our prize giveaway. We've got a gift card in the amount of $500 from Amazon going to Matt Sazmark, Zarmack. Sarmack. Sorry for mispronouncing that. But Matt from Illinois. Congratulations, Matt S. from Illinois. We've got 2 more gift cards to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And now it's time to introduce our next presenter on today's Security EcoCast. That is Mr. Perry Carpenter, Chief Evangelist and Strategy Office at KnowBe4. Perry, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
Thanks for being on the event, Perry. Take it away.
All right. So given the short time that we have today, I'm going to be pretty quick and take everyone through the methodology that we have behind the study, and then some study results around the kind of the success that we've seen in using a best practice approach at user awareness training combined with frequent simulated phishing. And this is really what we're about as a company, but it's nice that the data really backs it up. So a little bit about me is really for the past 15 years, I've been moving more and more into the human psychology piece of security because I've worked at large organizations and have helped large organizations spend hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on all the technical layers of security, which are very valid and needed. But at the same time, what I've seen over and over and over again is that organizations have a tendency to use technology and to neglect humanity. And when we use technology and rely on technology at the expense of focusing on the human layer, we've actually left a critical layer out of the defensive stack. And so what we really want to do as an organization, and I hope as an industry, is to bring that last layer of defense, that layer 8 security, that human security piece, really up to the forefront of security leaders' minds so that we're very intentional about creating that resilient human layer of defense. And so that is really who we are as a company, is to train employees to make smarter security decisions every day and create a human firewall that is the effective last line of defense when all the security software fails, because a crafty attacker will just go around all of the technology and target the human. And so the first thing that we'll talk about is phishing and why that's such a problem. And then we'll talk about the benchmark data that I've brought today. And we'll talk about how that breaks out by industry as well. And then we'll lead off and end off with some actionable tips. So first on phishing, I mentioned really quickly that I've been focusing more and more on the human side of this over the past 15 years or so. And that really is because we've seen over and over and over again that we can put all of our money and all of our hopes and all of our dreams in technology-based solutions that have nice, comforting, blinking lights. And those things do create a perimeter and an ecosystem that becomes really crunchy. it becomes really difficult to penetrate using technology. But what the crafty attackers have found is that when they try to hack into a system and that doesn't work because they don't have the right credentials or they're not in the right network segment or something else like that, they'll just go around all of that. And they'll pick up the phone and they'll call Bob in accounting and just convince Bob that they need Bob to email them the data that they're looking for. And Bob, trying to be a helpful human and believing the person on the other end of the line will comply with that request. Or they'll craft a nicely worded email that is legitimate in many ways, that uses the right types of language, that uses the right structure and grammar and everything else, and it flies through all of the different filters that an organization has put in place, lands in Bob's email inbox. Bob opens it up and clicks on the link or downloads the malware or inputs the credentials or attaches the file and sends it off. And so over and over and over again, we found that the strict reliance on technology to become a preventative measure is kind of putting too much hope in something that does have a natural limit. And so we need to find ways to fill that gap. And the primary way that we can fill that gap is by creating greater resilience with the human piece of this. And we focus on this specifically phishing, because phishing over and over and over again is the number one threat action that gets used in successful data breaches. And so the bad guys, when the technology gets too difficult to circumvent, they'll circumvent it using the human. And the primary way that they'll do that is through phishing right now. And so we do want to spend a decent amount of our time thinking about how to deal with the problem of phishing. And just to refamiliarize everyone with a model that most people have seen before, this is the cyber kill chain that was put forth by Lockheed Martin several years ago. And when you get down to the way that phishing works, a crafty attacker that's trying to create a credible phish will do their homework. They'll start with this reconnaissance piece. They want to understand what the landscape is that they can start to take advantage of. So what's the attack surface that they can go after? What are the email addresses that are already in the wild? Maybe what user IDs and passwords may have been exposed in data breaches? What media can they start to look at from LinkedIn and Facebook and everywhere else to get an understanding of the people in an organization, the types of language and words that they use to describe projects in the organization, the departments that they're in, the hierarchy, and all of that. So they're going to do all of that rich reconnaissance, and then they're going to find a way to weaponize that, typically with a phishing email or some other pretext. And so they'll put all that reconnaissance to use by crafting just the right lure and then sending that off. And of course, that lands in Bob in accounting's inbox. And once that click takes place, then all these other things happen. The exploitation of that, the installation, and then you have the traditional rest of that where a command and control center is set up and the attacker is basically starting to act on their objectives. There are other methods that skip a lot of that. I call this, the FBI calls this business email compromise, which is these financially motivated social engineering attacks. And you can see that written about in the Verizon DBIR as well. But these don't even use links or have downloadable attachments. They just trick somebody into wiring money to an account that they give them the information for, or attaching sensitive data to an email and sending it to the attacker directly. And so in some cases, there is no installation and there is no command and control server and all those other steps that get set up. It's just game over from the time that the person interacts with the cyber criminal. So I'll move forward real quick. And what I want to share today is an evolution of a study that we started last year. And we saw some really interesting trends come out of that. The most interesting one was a validation of the approach that we took, validation based on a lot of real crunchy data that we were able to use as we started to look at the customers that we had that were using our recommended approach for deploying security awareness training. And what we found is that when somebody uses the recommended approach versus the non-recommended approach, that the recommended approach does yield the results that we would hope as an industry that they yield. And so it's really encouraging numbers. And we did that in a kind of a coarse-grained way last year where we just gave some basic raw numbers. This year, we broke that out by industry in a much more granular type of way. And the numbers still tell a really, really good story. And in fact, in some areas, they're even more encouraging than they were before. So here's the methodology that we used. We started with approximately 9 million unique email recipients that we included in a baseline phishing test. So that means they've never been phished before using the system. They've never been trained. They just get sent that initial phishing test to see what their susceptibility is. We did this across around 18,000 organizations. And over the course of 12 months, we sent 20 million phishing tests. And so our best practice approach is always that you run an initial baseline test, and then you train as frequently as possible using the most realistic simulated phishing scenarios that you can use. And by frequent, when we say you need to do frequent testing, we mean at least once a month, combined with some security-related training. And so that's our best practice recommendation. And what we wanted to do with this study is track the organizations that were following that approach and see their beginning number, where they got after approximately 90 days, and then where they were at the end of a year when it comes to user resilience to phishing. And so here's the phases of measurement. Phase one, if a user hasn't been trained, you send a phishing attack and you want to see what their resulting PPP is. And PPP is phish-prone percentage. And then we move on to phase two. So we know what our initial baseline is. And then we wanted to look at the different industries and sizes and see what the monthly results were after 90 days. And then phase three is to see the final resulting number. So those are the three critical measurement points. Point one, no training has been done. Point two is after approximately 3 months. And then point three is after a year. And so what we saw is that within this initial baseline test, there are some risky industries that are out there. Small and medium businesses, so organizations of 1 to just under 250 people. Construction showed itself to be the most risky organization with a 38% phish-prone percentage, followed very narrowly by retail and wholesale, and then insurance. Within medium-sized organizations, construction still topped the list, followed by insurance and then manufacturing, and then large organizations, so organizations of over 1,000 employees, hospitality at a 48% phish-prone percentage, followed by construction, and then energy and utilities. So, I mean, hospitality, that number in itself is really shocking. So that means that basically half of the employee population in that initial baseline survey did click on the link. They would expose the organization to extreme cyber risks. They would be the path that a cyber criminal could exploit easily in order to breach the organization. And so it gives organizations, when you see numbers like this, they're not to shame people or to dishearten the people in those industries. What they are, though, is a wake-up call. They serve as a wake-up call. And frankly, when you start off that bad, it's hard to get worse. And so it can only get better with training. And so, but it is a wake-up call. If you're in an organization right now that fits one of these profiles and you're not doing frequent simulated phishing, then you are at a huge risk. That's what the numbers show. And it's time to put some effort and some intentionality behind strengthening that last line of defense. And so here's where the numbers shake out in phase one. So initial baseline test across all the different industries within those size ranges that I mentioned. And what I'd encourage you, because we don't have a lot of time on the call today, is just scan down. Well, I'll leave this up for a second. Just scan down, find your industry, and find the size range that you're in. And make a note of what that is for your industry. You know, again, here, if you scan about halfway down the page, you'll see hospitality right after healthcare and pharmaceuticals. And then you scan over to the 1,000 and plus employee range, you see that 48.4. However, if you're in a smaller organization, that's not quite as bad. In fact, these mid-size hospitality organizations are 23.6%. I mean, it's still bad. That's 1 in 4, but there's a story to be told there. I mean, what does it mean that when there's an organization that's less than 250 in hospitality, that they're 34%, which is higher than the mid-range, and then the 1,000 plus is way high. I don't personally know what the story is. I can create some supposition around that based on what I know about the industry, but there's some interesting things to ask yourself there if you're in that spot. But the end result of that narrative is there's more work to be done. Regardless of why you believe that number is what it is, the answer is that there's more work to be done. And the way to answer that and to create the path for doing that work doesn't really even matter right now based on the industry, because if you do anything, you're going to improve. And so what we're going to show you now is that improvement over 90 days. And this is really just, again, following a best practice approach to dealing with this. And so after this first quarter, what we see is that and actually let me go back one. Let me talk about this raw number for a second. The aggregate number across all of these shows an aggregate of about 30%. So most organizations would average out at about 38% susceptible to being phished within that first, I think I said 38. Let me go back to say that. It's about 30% susceptible to being phished within that first initial baseline test. So where we go from there is really working on the intentionality piece. So that means what I want to do is have at least one phishing simulation per month so I can start to build muscle memory and build strength and resilience with the scenarios that we're testing. And then I want to couple that with the information-based campaigns as well. And then so where we get after 90 days then is you start to see some real improvement. And that aggregate number you see goes down to 15% across these industries. And within a few of these industries, you see some interesting trends. So if I go up to banking, what you see here in this first row is that there's already some pretty good results. I mean, you see 9.7% for under 250 employees, 12% for 250 to 99 or 999 employees, and 16.4% for 1,000 plus. Again, let's jump back and compare that to the previous numbers. In this baseline test, banking was 29.3% for the lowest, the smallest organizations, 31.3% for mid-sized organizations, and 25.7% for large organizations. So after 90 days, that is a dramatic, really dramatic decrease. And again, there's probably stories behind why that's effective within those organizations, my supposition there would be that they're used to dealing with more regulation and more control and more scrutiny, and so they have better ways of pushing out those types of programs. So there's detail, there's richness in why this is as effective as it is. But even if you say that that's that effective because there is that legacy of control, and that's why their numbers get so low, you still can't deny the fact that all these other numbers are significantly lower than where they were before. Again, I'm just going to flip back and forth so you can find your industry and you can take a look. I mean, no matter what industry you're in, that's success after 90 days. That's significant progress. And now, as if that wasn't significant enough after 90 days, what we see after 12 months is that perseverance really, really pays off. So after 12 months, what we get down to is that aggregate of 2%. And these numbers here are really, really encouraging. Regardless of the industry, regardless of the size, you have under 5% for everybody. Well, with the exception of construction, still struggling a little bit with 1,000 plus employees at 7.9%. But compared to where they were before at 48%, that's a significant reduction. That's 1 in 10 as opposed to 5 in 10, or just under 1 in 10 as opposed to 5 in 10. So still more work to be done there, but significant improvement. And when you just look at an order of magnitude perspective, this is several orders of magnitude improvement, very, very significant. And I think shows a validation of the results that when you really work at this, when you do a frequent simulation as opposed to, let's say, a quarterly test or a yearly test, you're actually driving the behavior that you want. You're training the behavior you want. You're creating the muscle memory that you want. You're building the strength that you want. So I'm going to just show that in a graph real quick. Here's where this charts out over 12 months. So the average is 30% at the beginning, drops down to 15% after 3 months, and then ends at just around 2% after 12 months. What we see is that overall there's about a 91% improvement across the industries. So really, really interesting results. And again, just validates the approach. Regardless of what industry you're in, if you're following the approach and you're being methodical about it, then you'll see results. And of course, we can help guide you on what types of information to put out and all of that. But the information really is just, that's a secondary piece of this. Where what this is measuring is the effectiveness of the simulated social engineering, really just building the reflex that you're trying to train for. Because that, and I'll say it as starkly as I can say it, information, while that's well and good in a security awareness program, it's good because it puts some of the right details in somebody's mind. But information alone will never stop an organization from having a breach. It's employee behavior that will dictate whether your organization has a breach. And behavior is something that you have to train the action of. You can't just train the concept of. You have to train the action of. Because I can look all day about the behavior that, let's say, a professional soccer player has. But unless I actually get on the field and do the movements and do the exercises and run the drills, I'm going to be a really poor soccer player. I'm going to be ill-prepared when somebody sends a professional soccer player against me. And the same thing is true when it comes to dealing with social engineering. We have to put people in that situation and let them fail safely so that when the real attack comes, that they've built the requisite muscle memory, that they can have a much better chance of fending off that attack. That's where this is going. You never get to 100%, possibility of being able to fend off all attacks. But if you can increase that resiliency by 91%, that's effective. And then here's the perspective that we have. When we put all of that in perspective, we see average improvement ranges in that 92%. Actually, if I just look at this previous one, this was just these 4 industries: financial, government, construction, and healthcare. When we look at all industries, then we get to 92% average improvement. And you can see the numbers here. What I want to transition to real quick with the remaining time is to just give you a best practice approach at thinking through an awareness program. So how do you create your human firewall? The first thing is to realize that people are a critical layer within the fabric of your programs. I think I've beat that over and over and over at the beginning and throughout talking about this. The other thing that I alluded at a second ago is that information alone is never the answer. So if you've been putting up posters and sending out videos and wondering why your people are still falling victim for these attacks, or they're still doing the wrong thing, or they still don't care, well, you have to understand that that's not how humans are built. Security awareness and secure behavior are 2 different things. And so the traditional programs have failed to account for this thing that I call the knowledge intention behavior gap. And what I mean by that is just because I know something doesn't mean that I'll act on it. And doesn't even mean that I'll intend to act on it. Just because I know doesn't mean that I care. And even when I care to do something, it doesn't mean that I'll act on it. And you see this all the time with people that make New Year's resolutions, or they say that they're going to do something. They have all the intent in the world to do the right thing, to lose weight or to save more or spend more time with their family or do X, Y, and Z. And when the time comes down to actually do the thing, they fall back into their old pattern, because at the time that they're making the decision, it doesn't feel like it's convenient in some way, or it doesn't feel like it's necessarily as important in some way, or they just follow blindly the behavior pattern that they have without even thinking about it. And so what we know and what we intend to do doesn't always dictate our actual action. And so we have to build a behavior-based approach at doing this. And I have these 3 pithy statements that I say all the time. These are what I call the 3 realities of security awareness. Number 1, just because I'm aware doesn't mean that I care. Number 2, if we try to work against human nature, we will fail. And number 3, what our employees do is way more important than what they know. And these are the things that we're going to have to grapple with. Knowing versus caring. People just don't care about the things that we hope that they're going to care about. And they don't care because they're living in the moment. And if we try to work against human nature and impose things that are hard and expect them to do things that only experts can do, well then we're ultimately going to fail there. And if we don't really focus on a behavior-based approach, then we're not focusing on what's important. We're not focusing on the thing that will actually stop the breach. Because, again, it's not knowledge that ever stops a breach. It's what somebody does. And you might argue it's what somebody does with that knowledge. But, again, even if somebody has the right knowledge in their head, it might not come to the forefront of their mind at the time that they're accidentally doing something. So that knowledge, in many ways, is secondary. And what we're trying to do, and what I'm trying to really beat home, is that if you can build secure reflexes, whether or not the knowledge comes to mind doesn't matter at that point. They react in the right way at the right time. So what I want to leave you off with, right before we have a chance for a question or two, is some suggestions on how to approach really thinking through some of these attack scenarios. I talked about the cyber kill chain. I'll just build this out. Here's how I think about it when it comes to phishing is you have pre-click activities, you have upon click activities, and then you have post-click activities. And so when you're thinking about this from a training perspective, we want to understand and you want to understand what your own attack surface is. What are the vulnerabilities that are out there? How's your company exposed? How are your people exposed? And then you want to simulate attacks that are based in reality with the information that could be gleaned publicly or through the dark web. And then you want to understand the impact within your own organization. And know before we've got, of course, paid tools that we sell and a great subscription, but we also have a number of free tools that I'll just point you to. One is that you can start to look at our domain spoof test, and so you can see if your domain can be spoofed. We do have an email exposure check and a pro version that starts to look and see where all your email addresses have been leaked and what details might be findable through social media and deep web searches and so on, so that you can see what type of attacker reconnaissance might be available to a cyber criminal and how they might build a spearfish. And you can start to see what the results are and what your attack surface looks like and how scary it is. But you can also use that as a starting point to start to close some of those issues out there and mitigate some of those risks. And that's really a great thing to be able to do. Because once you know your exposure, you can start to do something about it. Another free tool that we have is our weak password test. And you can start to see where people aren't following good password hygiene. Using default passwords or easy-to-guess passwords or replicating passwords across accounts. And if you combine that EEC Pro and weak password test, you can start to see where some of your most vulnerable targets are, because they would be at the intersection of those people who have appeared in breaches and are using bad password hygiene, because that means the bad guy doesn't really have to work that hard. They can just take probably credentials from an old breach, plug them into your system using that exposed account, and maybe have entry day one. Or they might be able to craft a spearfish that uses that old password to convince somebody that they've got dirt on them or have compromised their account or something else like these sextortion scams, and then get somebody to act on an objective. And so it becomes some really interesting ways to combine all those when you think about how to bait the hook. We also put out a number of reports every quarter just showing the types of subjects that attackers are using and that are really starting to make an impact from an attacker perspective and show where the vulnerabilities are. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at those. You start to see what's good in the wild, as well as some of the things that people are doing on simulations that are showing really good results. And then you want to train your people about the different levers that attackers will try to pull. And so one other thing that I'll leave you with is just a few final thoughts. Number one, humans are the de facto top choice for cyber criminals seeking to gain access into your organization. And so what you want to do is you want to use frequent simulated attacks to start to build the muscle memory that's needed. And it's a proven methodology. It will dramatically, as you saw the numbers, from 30% in a baseline down to 2% after 12 months. That's a dramatic reduction in susceptibility to phishing. And if you are going to effectively manage this, it means ongoing due diligence. This problem doesn't go away. If you got down to 2% after a year, it doesn't mean you're done. You actually have to keep going. You have to keep training that muscle, because at all times you're either building strength or you're allowing atrophy. So if you get to your desired result and you stop, your people will start to revert back to their old behavior. It's just the way that we are built as human. It goes back to that second reality of security awareness that I talked about, is that if we try to work against human nature, we'll fail. Human nature is always to revert back to the old easy pattern. And so we have to consistently work on this, not stop after 12 months, but keep going over and over and over again, always testing on the most current scenarios, always building the strength that we want, reinforcing the muscle memory that we want, and then we'll have the results that we're looking for. So with that, I will take us to the end, and we'll see if we have any questions.
Yeah, great presentation, Perry. We do have some questions. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Know Before solution? And we'll just leave that up. excuse me. First question that came in here, they're asking, how do you investigate and take action once a user clicks on the report phishing button?
Well, there's a couple of different paths there. So when it says, if the person's asking how we at KnowBe4 do, there's I need to make a clarification. When somebody clicks report phishing, it goes to that organization's incident response team based on rules that organization has set up. So really it's defined based on the organization and how they want to handle it. Now, you can anonymously share the results of that with us. So if you had decided to share that phishing email with us, then that also goes to our analysis team, and we do our own investigation on that. And frequently, if they're interesting fish, then we'll turn that into a phishing template later on because that's valuable. It's in the wild. It's something that people are using. But at the organizational level, you have to decide what you want to do with it. And you have to really look at the context of the email and say, is this really a threat or is this innocuous? And so there's basically three ways to look at any email that gets reported. It's either something good or it's something that is really kind of innocuous, but it's unwanted, or it's a threat. So let's say it's in the good category. Maybe your benefits department decided to send out something and people thought it looked malicious because it had a link. At that point, you need to release it back to the user. Let's say somebody reports spam. It's a newsletter that they don't want anymore, so they click that they suspect it's a phish. At that point, you need to go back to the user and say, this is actually not a threat. This is something that you probably asked for. You need to go through and either set up a rule so it's auto-deleted, or you need to unsubscribe. And then if it's a threat, it's still really important to close the loop and say, thank you for submitting that to us, because you want people to feel the social reward of having done the right thing. We do also sell a product called PhishER that helps organizations automate all of that and deal with the potential deluge of email that a large organization may face if a lot of people start to become very conscious of phishing and starting to report lots of email. Helps you close all the loops, build all the rule sets, and auto-treat a lot of the emails that come through.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Another question here, they're asking about what should we do with an employee that constantly fails their training?
Yeah, that's a big debate in the industry. There's kind of a group that really moves and says the only thing we want to focus on is positive reinforcement. And then there's another group that says, all right, if you click on 3 phishing tests, you fail. And I don't think that the answer is one or the other. I think that you have to look at the entirety of the situation. So the first thing with phishing emails is you always want to be testing up to the point of failure. You want to be really trying to train on threats that are in the wild, and that means that every now and then you're going to be showing somebody something that they've never seen before, like a business email compromise email. They might not have been prepared for that well. The first time they see it, they may fail. And if they've failed 2 other, really new, interesting threats in that year, it doesn't mean that they should be fired, potentially. But you may need to figure out how to engage with that person or that department that's failing. But at the risk of overusing the term, I'll say you have to take a holistic approach. You want to constantly find ways to socially reward where people are doing the right thing, which would mean reporting suspected fish, reporting and doing the right thing when it comes to simulated fish. But when you're seeing failures over and over and over again, you have to take a behavior-based approach at looking at that. And if you look at this from a psychology or behavioral economics point of view, behavior happens when 3 things come together. There's a motivation aspect, an ability aspect, and a prompt that happens at the point of behavior. And if either one of those three things are missing, then you don't get the behavior. So what you want to look at when it comes to detecting fish is, does somebody have the ability to do it? Does somebody have the right motivation, and are they in the context that would naturally prompt them to detect it? In many cases, what you'll start to see is that we unintentionally put employees in high-pressure situations where they just may naturally start clicking on and opening everything because, let's say, we've understaffed a department, and let's say that department is HR, and that department's job is literally to open every attachment that comes through, and they don't have the resources or the time to put to detecting it. So we've kind of put them in a fail or a lose-lose situation. And at that point, you need to start looking at how do we not only equip these people from a training perspective, but what other technical controls might we put in place to help enable them to do their jobs in a more secure way. So I don't think that there's a blanket answer. I think there's a lot of nuance, and I'm always happy to jump on the phone and think through any scenario-based examples of that. But I hate to just give a blanket, this is how you do it answer, because it just doesn't work in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that insight. I think that's all the time we have for our live questions. There's still a few more technical questions that I have assigned to you there in the queue. Maybe you can respond to those. But really great presentation, Perry. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to KnowBe4 for sponsoring today's event. We got a lot of great feedback from the audience there in the Q&A, folks who are already using KnowBe4 and really enjoying it. For more information, make sure you check out the Fishing by Industry Benchmark Report. It's available for download right there in the audience console if you click on handouts. All the stats that Perry shared in this presentation and more are in that handout. So make sure that you check that out and download it or later review. And now it's time to award our next Amazon $500 gift card. That's going out to Rylan Schoenberg from South Dakota. I'll post the names of the winners in the chat box, but it's Rylan Schoenberg from South Dakota. We've got one more gift card to give away after the next presentation, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mo Anderson, SVP of Engineering at SaltStack. Mo, are you with us?
Yes, I am, David.
Thanks for being on the event today, Mo. Take it away.
Thank you so much, David. Really excited to be here and join this exciting webcast that we've been through. A lot of great topics ahead. For those who are meeting for the first time, my name is Mo Anderson. I lead the engineering organization at SaltStack. For those not familiar with SaltStack, SaltStack is been around for a long time. We think of ourselves as the industry's most scalable, event-driven IT automation platform. Very much focused on controlling, optimizing, and securing any infrastructure. And by that, we think through all types of infrastructure, whether it's on-premises, data centers, virtual machines, cloud environments, networks, or IoT devices. Increasingly, this topic of security and how do we actually resolve some of the challenges that are attributed in this space has been top of mind for us, for our clients and our community, specifically around the idea of SecOps. What we essentially have been identifying amongst the many challenges in the space is this whole notion that there is a particular area we have to pay close attention to and one that we really need to address. And that is the one that is related to the two institutions within any organizations that have to deal with bringing security and compliance to the enterprise or to a particular environment. And that's the security team and the operations team. When we think a little bit more closely around those types of challenges, the SecOps one, the first one that we come and encounter is, frankly, the disconnect between those two teams. In a way, if we want to oversimplify this, to the security team, the number one job, as we've been hearing, is to keep data safe. That often means that you're having to say no, or you have to be suspicious or concerned with any idea or a new project or a new environment that you may be trying to deploy. For the IT team, their number one job is, of course, to try and enable the organization, get new projects, seize opportunities, react to the needs of the business, help grow the revenue, and so on and so forth. And typically that means that at times the IT organization is running very fast at trying to support these business needs, and their motto is to try and say yes to as many things as we can. Of course, both of those organizations that are responsible for blocking these security breaches and creating a lot of that unity in terms of countering the threats, they have these different priorities, timelines, objectives. And much of what we've been recognizing from the feedback we hear from business leaders is that it's time to try and take a new approach to bridge the gap between security and operation teams, and ensure that a lot of these systems, frankly, are not just running and have a great velocity behind them in terms of updates, upgrades, and so on, but are also secure and compliant. So many of them, of course, think of SecOps as that approach. How do we actually link security and operations together with a shared accountability, processes, and tools? When we think around the next sets of challenges that we have in this particular space, if you take that particular disconnect further, we recognize that there are too many tools. It's not an issue of a tool or a single solution. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The issue is too many tools. There are many tools that assess, plethora of them. They assess your applications, they assess your environment, their network, and so on. But many of them fall short of actually helping you remediate. So you end up understanding where the threat is, but you don't necessarily have the bridge to be able to quickly and rapidly address that particular threat. A subset, of course, of those tools try to actually proceed with bridging that particular gap of remediation. But frankly, what they end up doing is that they create an alternate workflow that is unnatural to the dynamics of any organization, one that takes into account the needs of the IT organization and the security organization. And further, those who have really attempted at resolving this disconnect and this issue have made some progress towards looking at assessments, looking at remediations, and looking at providing some out-of-the-box content that would sort of expedite this whole process. But unfortunately, what we've been hearing from our community and many of the clients is that much of that content is, again, falling short from being robust, complete, or frankly, easily accessible. In fact, in some instances, much of that effort has been in the open and community-driven, lacking, if you like, the notion of discipline in some instances, or robustness, or being backed up and governed. So all of these types of issues, when you think about it, both the organizational disconnect, the fact that we have too many point solutions that don't easily integrate, or if they do, they try to alter the natural path of collaboration, leads us to the next and final challenge, which is all around this idea of how, once I've identified a threat, can I quickly go ahead and resolve it? Because that's what I need to do. The rate at which these threats are hitting us is much more rapid. There isn't a single day that goes by without us hearing in the news or understanding some new potential exposure. So how can I bridge that? And I don't want reports, I want remediation. Essentially, for the security analysts, what we hear from them is, I understand where the fire is, but I need the fire hose. So tell me, how do I get out of my compliance hell, because I have a backlog of reports that's telling me what I need to be addressing. That compliance hell means, if you imagine one of those typical scenarios for any one of those security analysts, and what we hear from them is an audit is coming up, and that becomes the opportune moment in which we want to go ahead and run one of those scans. Once we run one of these scans, the remediation report is created and sent to the IT team. The IT team, of course, has to sit down, understand, translate, connect this to the environment, and understand how that vulnerability matches to a particular system. And in fact, even if that particular vulnerability is applicable to the environment. Once that ops team is manually gone ahead and try and do that assessment, they hand it back to the security team, who runs yet another scan, determines that there are still some more exposures, and the loop goes on and on around that discussion and that dialogue, meeting after meeting, hey, why didn't we fix this? Well, this is not applicable. Hey, did we fix this? Well, we did, but it looks like we got exposed again, so we need to do it, until finally a report gets produced where we can determine that the infrastructure is actually secure. Frankly, by the time we get there, we hear from many of our clients and the community that it's actually outdated and it's time to start over again. So with that as a context around the challenges, how do we bring the teams together? How do we actually address the idea that while we are swimming in many, many tools, none of them seem to give us that full life cycle that we need, with the ultimate goal of accelerating the time to remediation, the time to compliance, and finally the recognition that the paradigm that exists today is not one that is driven around collaboration and enabling these teams. What can we do? That actually is at the heart of what we've been thinking through at SaltStack. We've been thinking about this challenge of SecOps, and we essentially have started to think around how do we address them. And it starts with this idea of being able to have live access to compliance profile. By live, we mean live content that is not stale, not one that takes a long time for us to understand and dig through, but actually a feed that we can manage and maintain on behalf of the clients that is available to them and describes all of the threats, all of the challenges that might exist in there, whether they are related to security vulnerabilities, whether they are related to certain security standards or compliance needs that are out there. The next area, of course, is how can we actually not just understand the threats that are out there, but more importantly, how can we customize our own policies around those particular security profiles. So rather than trying to tackle one particular vulnerability or one particular system or environment, we can start to understand that we can, as an organization, create a policy that governs the way in which we deal with these types of threats. Anytime I see this types of threat, I want to be able to automate, create a rapid scan and a rapid remediation behind the scenes that ensure that I'm in a constant compliance state. Thirdly, in order to back up that type of a promise, the ability for us to understand all of those, live, if you like, requirements for compliance, and the ability for us to create a policy that is automated and self-managed, we have to be able to provide a very fast, large-scale system that can scan across that hybrid environment that I described earlier, from the IoT device to the cloud part of the composite application to the system and the network device and so on. So can I scan all of those, and can I do that at a large scale and in a very rapid fashion? And of course, can I couple that, which is around the remediation aspect, with automated remediation? And the aspect of automated remediation plays a central part in terms of that notion of accelerating time to resolution. So with that in mind, I thought I would actually switch over here and rather than talk through the next part, actually get us to see some of it in live action. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And David, let me confirm if you're able to see my screen here with a SaltStack login.
I see it now. Yeah, it looks good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before I jump into the demo, let me give you context. SecOps, as I said earlier, is really about bringing together the security and IT teams and operations teams together. To us, rethinking the model in which we can expedite collaboration, smooth over the friction and the challenges that enable both of those teams to meet that business objective is key. For our demo, we have two personas. One is Sam, the security analyst, and the other one is Ollie, the operations lead. To start with, I'm going to log in as Sam, and essentially what I'm going to start to think through is start my life cycle with the notion that I've just learned of a security threat. This particular security threat seems to have been raised around the idea of something that might be wrong with one operating system. In this particular instance, let's imagine it to be something, let's say, with CentOS. And once I've been alerted with that, I'm able to get into my system once it allows me to log in. I think I mistyped my password. I'm able to go into that system and start the process of identifying whether this particular risk is applicable to me or whether it is not. So in this instance, logs into the system once she understood that there was that particular threat. Now, of course, as she logs into the system, one of the things that she's always been presented with is a view of her whole environment. SAM in this particular case has been authorized to have two regions, US East and US West, in which she's created past security policies. Of course, today her focus is on understanding this particular threat that she's learned of as it relates to one particular operating system. In this case, let's say it's CentOS. Her first, of course, action is to go and determine that she needs to go and create a scan and understand how wide that particular threat is applicable to her environment. She starts off by creating a policy. She gives this particular policy a name, and in this instance, she's going to just call it OS CVE, and she decides that she's going to run this against the US East region, where she understands that that particular OS environment is actually applicable. Now, one of the exciting things that she's able to see immediately as she logs in is that she has pre-built live feed of content that is updated daily for her. And it covers all of these OS environments, etc. Now, she knows that this particular vulnerability is related to the workstations and the CentOS level 7. She decides to check on these particular benchmarks. Those are the ones that she's interested in, and she goes and creates a policy. Within that policy view, again, without having to manually go and dig or understand, provided to her are all the checks that are applicable to this particular benchmark. She very quickly can scan and understand what is related to this particular vulnerability. She knows this is related to restricting access to cron jobs and running those only for authorized users. And she determines that that's the area that she wants to focus in. So she clearly has a lot of checks, but the one that she's interested in is not necessarily to go through all of them, but she's only wanting to go and look at the ones that are related to cron. So very quickly she's able to search for the cron jobs. She determines that those are the ones that she wants to be able to, oops, let's get that one, show you all of them again. And if you see in here, just to confirm again, there were many check marks that she can go through. Instead, she decides that she's actually going to go ahead and only select the ones that are related to cron. And as we can see, there are about a handful of those. She selects those and determines that that's the scope of the policy that she wants to run. Now, when she runs this particular policy, she determines that she actually, at this stage, just wants to run it on demand. She's not interested in trying to create a daily, cycle or monthly cycle or so on, but instead she wants to be able to understand where is the threat. Quite simply, she chooses all of these checks that are part of the benchmark, and she goes ahead and runs an assessment. Once this assessment runs, behind the scenes, the platform is, of course, trying to understand and deploy all of the agents and tries to go ahead and create a particular job that runs in the background and determines against all of these, if you like, checks, whether things are compliant, non-compliant, whether they are not even applicable to the environment, which is an important thing. It's a key efficiency differentiator for the IT ops folks later on in the cycle to be able to understand that there are things that they don't need to worry about. Once the activity starts to run, what she's able to do is go inside and frankly start to look into the details of any one of those particular jobs. So in this case, when we're looking at this job that's running in, I can go inside. I can look at any one of those particular policies, and I quickly start to see whether there are some compliances that are occurring or not. Now, the scan is running behind the scenes. One of the things she can also do is go back and look at some of the other areas in which she had run previously some of the exemptions and stuff. Now, no results have come back yet because the system is running behind the scenes to run these checks. The other thing that is available for Sam, the security analyst, is while the system is running, and we already see that we have some 5 non-compliances that are coming back, 3 systems that are compliant, she can actually go down to the device level. And she understands that this particular system may have 5 non-compliances. While the scan is running, she can go in and try and understand what are those issues that are triggering that. She sees already that the threat that she's been made aware of is actually real for their environment. The permissions, etc., are not configured correctly, which essentially means that there is an exposure, and we must address that. Now, Sam can wait, of course, for the scan to complete, but this is enough for her to see that already there are several non-compliances. So she goes ahead and alerts Ollie that we already are vulnerable and we need to be taking action. That alert through the platform can be done either through an integration with ticketing systems such as ServiceNow, Slack, or frankly even with any other part of the tool chains that an organization has. Some have integrated this into their DevOps tool chain. Others have their own sort of custom made. Whatever it is, we're able to actually integrate into that. So Sam is done for now. She's like, I'm already seeing that we have, non-compliances. I'm good to go. I need Ollie to pay attention to this. And in comes the next cycle of our story. Ollie, without having to have a meeting or manually receive reports that he deciphers, Ollie is able to actually go into the system and quickly understand that he's been alerted of a particular vulnerability and a policy that he needs to check. Now notice that Ollie has several systems in here. US West and East happens to be Sam's responsibility. Central, which he also sees, maybe another security analyst. Now he doesn't care about this for the moment because he's just been alerted and he's on the ball to try and get this OSCVE issue resolved. Now when he comes into this particular issue around the environment, what Sam has already alerted him is that there is already an issue with some of these 5 non-compliances. In the same fashion that Sam has been able to go and look at the details behind any one of these non-compliances, Ollie can see the exact same information. There is no disconnect between the 2 teams, and they're both able to understand the same language and target into the same areas. He already can see that that is the particular system that is exposed. And of course, from his point of view, what he cares about is to go ahead and initiate a remediation. Now, this is an interesting part of what the platform actually enables. There are 2 cases, 2 organizational styles. There's a style in which the IT ops team must continue to maintain control, and they're the only ones that can remediate. Another organizational style could be that we empower and enable the security analyst to actually run the remediation. The good news is the platform is flexible to either model. In the same way that we saw an evolution in DevOps, where Ops is able to allow devs to do more, such as build their own environments, the notion of SecOps is evolving in that same fashion. Now, for this particular organization, Ollie continues to be able to be the central control point for running these remediations, and he's been able to go ahead and trigger one of those jobs. What you'll see in here is that we've essentially started to run the remediation in the background. Ollie, given that he's an operational person, can not only look at the actual progress, he can actually see what other jobs are running, and frankly, independent of this particular task, can look at others that have been running in the past. Once Ollie gets a feel that the environments and the jobs are running around the remediation aspect, and he feels like things have been completed, which is what we see in here, he's actually able to go back and essentially run the assessment again. Now, in this particular case, he runs an assessment, we get that going, and of course, behind the scenes, we get to see that the activity has been triggered, and he's waiting for it. Now, interestingly, there's a couple of things that will happen. The first is, while a particular environment is being remediated, some things can be automatically remediated because Ollie has authorized them to be in that instance actioned that way. Others, for example, cannot be remediated automatically. So they sit in this state because either Ollie wants to make sure that there's a graceful shutdown of that system before we make it compliant, or that there is in the policy and in the engine knowledge that that particular system must complete a task before another one is remediated. So all of that orchestration behind the scenes has been pre-built for Ollie, which is really important. And what we start to see as the activity is been running is more systems are compliant and less are in the state of non-compliant. So for Ollie, the assessment has been, the remediation has been completed, the assessment has been completed, and he can actually go ahead and run another scan to ensure that he shares it with Sam and get her to see that, hey, we've already on the job, we've already actually made some of these system compliant, and as such, we only have one particular non-compliance that we will address and work towards. In the interest of time, at this stage, I will go back to summarize what we saw and what we looked at, but nonetheless, it's important to highlight that through this particular collaborative environment, both Sam and Ollie were able to actually collaborate. They were able to create a scan of a particular threat. For that particular scan, they were able to create a policy. In fact, they're able to constantly update that policy. Now that they recognize that this is a threat that could occur all the time, they may go ahead and choose to alter the schedule and make it run on a daily basis and so on and so forth. That will assure Sam, the security analyst, that all is not just going to pay attention to this issue and then go worry about the next thing and forget about it, but rather that the system and the platform has been automated to keep the environment compliant. So that concludes the demo portion, and if I will go ahead now and go back to the slides. And again, David, if I may check that you can see my slide in here.
I can, yes, Mo.
That's great. Thank you very much. So what did we actually see? The first thing we saw in here is, first and foremost, the environment essentially has been able to interface with any type of the infrastructure. The first thing that we looked at is whether the system needed a particular hardened connection through agents, whether it was a cloud-based proxy API connection, or whether, frankly, it was an agentless system because of that nature of the environment. The platform was able to interface with any one of those devices. As part of being able to interface with those devices, understand their state, and then understand whether they're compliant or not based on the live feed, it was able to then move on and actually secure that particular environment against a predefined configuration. Out of the box, Ollie did not need to go and write scripts. Ollie did not need to go and try and manually figure out how to resolve a vulnerability. Out of the box, a lot of the remediation actions were built for him. Further, not only were we able to create that remediation in the context of the immediate threat, we're able to create a policy that ensured that that system is always compliant. And that includes the ability for both Sam and Ollie to understand that that automated compliance is auditable. There are reports, and of course there are, if you like, traceable actions that they can go back to understand how we actually kept the system patched and in compliance. And finally, which is very important, the demo, of course, really illustrated the capabilities in the context of a small environment. But when we're talking about large-scale environments with thousands and thousands of devices, you really have to have an infrastructure behind the scenes that is able to implement that scan at scale and be able to ensure that remediation is occurring regardless of the type of system or where it resides. And that's why behind the scenes, the whole SecOps capability has been built on this whole notion of an event-driven automation. It detects a particular state or a particular non-compliance or a particular change, and it automates the compliance if we choose it to do. Whether we want to make it fully automated or partially automated, it's all within the grasp and control of the IT folks. This is exactly why we've really built up the platform to be able to meet the needs of large organizations, whether it's actually IBM Cloud or Adobe, or various others who have been deploying this capability at scale. The needs of the particular platform was to try and, of course, address both if you like, the ability to be live and current on understanding the threats, but also to be able to remediate at scale. With that, I thank everybody for listening in and really appreciate some of the questions that are coming in the background. And please feel free to join us at SaltStack's website to learn more or actually experience or see some of these capabilities for yourselves. Thank you, David. I don't know if we have any questions.
We do. Yes, Mo. Let me bring up this poll question while we do some questions from the audience. One question that came in, they're asking about RBAC. Does SaltStack's reporting offer any sort of RBAC capabilities today?
The answer to that is yes, absolutely. So both we actually deliver RBAC capabilities out of the box, and we also extend that to be able to integrate with further systems and so on that an organization has. The granularity of the RBAC capabilities go as low as that minion level, which we saw in the demo, essentially at the device or a subcomponent of the device, or of course it can be done at the policy level or groups and so on and so forth.
Okay, nice. Another question here, do you offer training on SaltStack?
Absolutely. We offer training. We have a regular cadence of training that is available to be delivered remote or actually on-site based on the needs of the clients. The training covers both folks who are new to the platform, all the way up, of course, to advanced concepts where you can further build the automation. And we also cover training that talks about the organizational aspects, the softer side of how do you make SecOps actually succeed at any organization.
Nice. Okay. This person's asking, they're using containers and Kubernetes. Is SaltStack compatible with that?
Yes, absolutely. So the answer to that is two parts. First, within the actual checks that we saw sent to us, if we had further scroll down, you would have seen Kubernetes, Docker, and so on and so forth. So one of the areas that we constantly hear from our clients is as they move on to microservices-based architectures or increase the use of their container-based deployments, trying to keep up that whole infrastructure compliant, ensuring that you're not essentially propagating threats that are within a container or the infrastructure of the containers, they actually play very nicely into this idea of accelerated remediation. So we provide the benchmarks out of the box and we automate the remediation. That's part number one. Part number two is that the platform itself for SaltStack is actually container friendly, which means that as you stand up a particular infrastructure, you're able to stand up a whole of the SaltStack platform to be resident with the system that you're deploying, meaning that SaltStack itself in a container context can be instantiated very quickly, can actually have a master that controls that environment and reach out and deploy minions very quickly. And that's exactly what IBM Cloud is doing.
Very nice. Another question here. What's the difference between SaltStack Enterprise and SaltStack SecOps?
So SaltStack SecOps is a module that builds as part of SaltStack Enterprise. For the purposes of simplicity, one should think of those as connected with each other. As you acquire the SecOps capability, you inherently get everything you need from SaltStack Enterprise, including the automation that I just described earlier and so on and so forth. We've branded the SecOps component, frankly, mostly to address that particular use case. Because SaltStack Enterprise can tackle more specialized use cases as well around NetOps, AIOps, ITOps, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in SecOps, that's the module you would acquire, and within it, you would get all of the automation capabilities you need.
Nice, okay. And then final question probably we have time for, how easy is it to get started with SaltStack SecOps?
Great question, and thank you for bringing that. I think often with a lot of these systems, there's always time to value in terms of being able to stand up the environment, understand the concepts. Much of what you've seen, either through the user interface, the training that we have available, is really been designed to try and get you up and running very quickly. And by that, we mean within days, you're able to understand the concepts, instantiate the environment against your target, and get going in terms of running the first sets of scans and remediations. The user interface capability is, of course, targeting the users such as the analysts who understand the concept, can essentially initiate and operate the system through that notion of policies. For the IT folks who would like to have a little bit more granular control through CLIs or APIs, or automate behind the scenes some of these actions, that's also available. And what we've learned and heard from many of our clients is that SaltStack has been fairly easy to actually pick up and run with. So for us, it was important to take that easy, if you like, starting base that we've developed around our CLIs and APIs and augmented with that user interface that really targets the expanded user profiles, including those in security.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for live questions, but I really appreciate the live demo and really love the user interface, by the way. Really cool product. So thank you for being on the event today, Mo.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for those who stuck with us while we address the login issues. Looking forward to connecting with everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, SaltStack, for supporting today's event. For more information, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. Of course, just visit saltstack.com and sign up for your own personal demo and see the solution for yourself. And now it's time for our final gift card giveaway. That Amazon $500 gift card is going to Matt Chumbley from Oregon. Congratulations, Matt Chumbley from Oregon. Best of luck to everyone on future drawings. If you were one of today's winners, you can visit events.actualtechmedia.com to sign up for future events. Also, check out our podcast, the 10 on Tech podcast, over in the iTunes Store. Make sure you follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn to learn about all of our upcoming events and content. If you are a potential sponsor of one of these events and would like to present, reach out to connect@actualtechmedia.com. I hope to see you on our next event, which is the Data Protection, Disaster Recovery, and DRAS MegaCast event. That is on October 24th. We'll be welcoming Veeam, Druva, Cohesity, Datacore, Nutanix, and Cisco. It's going to be a great event. Hope to see you there. I hope that you enjoyed today's Security and Networking EcoCast. Thank you for your support and participation. We'll see you on the next event. Have a great day.